To me, it is quite interesting to play with the game God planned us to play. You can replace the word God by the laws of the universe or laws of the nature. The point is that as we live, I keep saying there are lots of interesting things happening. And the reason why I'm saying this in this video is that my friend told me, I use the word quite often, the other friend also told me, so I start to think, wow, that's interesting. And as I think about the event that triggers me interest is some uniqueness of discovery by nature or human. And that triggers me. It's like I'm getting the insight or wisdom by someone to notice that I'm finding some insight or wisdom on my own, just living life. And so I utter this phrase, oh, that's interesting. I don't know if anyone noticed that my video I use the word interesting often, but all the point I want to share is how we may perceive the world. Of course, there are some ups and downs, but in terms of appreciating the law of the universe, or God's plan, thy will be done, may be manifested by some unique fashion which we may notice or we may not notice. And I'm not saying that I notice more often than others, but my response to that is to kind of assure to myself that there are lots of interesting stuff in the world, in the universe, anywhere. Just point one that popped up in my mind right now was the case of a documentary film of a subject called Octopus Teaching or something like that, from the man spent every day diving in the ocean to monitor how the octopus is living. By itself, it's interesting, but as I went through this, it took perhaps 3 settings of checking the video because it was long enough to cut it up by a few pieces. But one of the last scene, if I can recall, yes, before the octopus was gone, because they start to find a friendship with each other, almost like a compassionate sense of love, to trust this guy from human side to monitor, and then the octopus start to relate to him. And the last scene before the octopus was gone was impressive scene of this diver having an octopus crawling up his chest. Totally interesting, to the point that such communication, such resonating sense that they shared, you can call it love, it's possible. Actually, I have another example that I thought about. There was the deer saved by a man, and that was the frozen lake, but the deer fell into the lake, and this guy helped him. So the deer came up from the water, pulled by this guy, and they went walking to the shore. And the guy decided, well, he was ready to leave, and the deer just stared at him. That's all. But that sense of the communication or understanding or feeling of relating to each other, it's possible between man and animal. Okay, those are just the 2 examples that popped up in my mind, but I can talk about others, like an insect or the monarch. I had the occasion of looking at the monarch crawling out of the how do you call that, tube-like thing that they start to metamorphose and fly out. And I was watching how they do it. Another example I could remember, this is when I was 13 years old in the junior high school. At my house, there was a small lake, it's a pond, and there was a spider casting the net. And I couldn't figure out why this branch from this side of the shore, across to the other side of the branch, which probably is about 5 feet away, the spider net was developed in between those distance, except it was above the water. So how could that be? One evening I was interested to check, and then I cut the web and see what happened. I noticed there's a spider, and I was waiting, and eventually I saw a string of the spider cast across, one string, from the branch A to branch B, the other side. And I couldn't believe what happened because I was watching, but I couldn't see anything. So of course, if you can cast the string across, then you can build up the spider web. But I couldn't see why it happened from this side to the other side, so I take the string, or whatever you call it, off, and then watched what happened to the spider. And a few minutes later, I realized another string was passing through between branch A to branch B above the water, and he is sitting on one side. And after 3 or 4 trials of taking off the string, I finally realized that the spider is casting the string out of his butt, whatever, and the string is so fine, floating in the air to go to the other side. So I remember making a little report on this as a science project, and maybe I got the grade A for that. One little story, because of this spider, was interesting. Story was interesting. I was in New Zealand. There was a big bay, maybe 200 yards across. And one evening, I was with Maori family camping with them, and they sing wonderful song in the evening, but we are watching the sunset, and then we saw that spider hanging on this string, which he may have cast out, up in the air, and he's like holding the string. And with the wind coming through above the bay, the spider could come across. And not just one spider, but I think we saw 3 or 4 of them. Anyway, I spent lots of time on this, what I call it, interesting phenomena in nature. But for whatever reason, I use the word interesting. And by hearing my friends telling me so much, and this lady was starting to use the word interesting quite often on herself, I thought I'll talk about it, because more we find those interesting events in life, I feel like we are given gift from God or the nature, amazement of what can happen. Whether it's a spider or the octopus or anything, and between or among human, lots of interesting stuff happens. I think if I were to say why I have posted the video about appreciating life, This must be one of the reasons why we are the miracle of the nature to exist here, out of nowhere, out of tiny cells. We are born, and from baby state, where they have no idea what's going on, capture what we are talking about, talk about it, they learn the language, and use the brain, and all of that. Why not? It's that is interesting. Or the invention is interesting event, following one after the other. I have patterns. It's a joy to figure out what you can do. We shouldn't be arrogant about the skills and ideas as if to conquer the nature or defeat or win over, because we came from there. Just thinking back about the Maori people I met, and their view of the world is such that everything comes from nature, fish or crops, whatever, is from the nature. And therefore, they don't own the land, at least that's what I understood. And everything goes back to nature. So it's a humble humility of who we are, relating to nature. And if we have that spirit, instead of getting lost into the web of the human society and the ego of this and that, and the pride and chasing all of that, I think it's good to go back to nature. I'm planning for a trip to Joshua Tree National Park for camping. I don't know what to expect, but out of the house, being in the nature, relating to what out there and who I am, I think I will find some interesting stories, experiences that I may find, hopefully, and more in my life. Thank you. The tree branches are swinging as if listening to my story. Of course they're not listening, but I feel like they're talking to me, saying, "Sadhu, sadhu, well said, well said." Our last story of Daisetsu Suzuki is Okamura-san saying that when he passed away, she came back to the garden where he used to live, and she found that in nature it's where Daisetsu is still alive. I think that's an interesting story. Thank you.